All right, it is Daytona week. Welcome back to Fast Cars, Fast Money. We are talking about really the Xfinity series and the Cup series. I guess this is going over more maybe the Cup series slightly. Um, but this is really it. I mean, this is going to be a strategy video, a preview video, initial thoughts, lineup construction. A lot of this really isn't going to change. You can really, use this after qualifying has been set. This might be it. I don't know if we're going to do a final picks video for any of the series. When you get to these super speedway races, it is relatively straightforward. It's going to be a lot of the same stuff you've probably heard on previous videos, but nonetheless, still wanted to put a video out there. So as always, just thank you guys for all the support, with liking, commenting, sharing, retweeting our content. That's really all we're really asking for right now. Subscribing to our YouTube channel. We're slowly but surely creeping up to 1,000 subscribers. Hitting a follow on Twitter. That's where we post our final spreadsheet. If you pull it up to build your lines, I know a lot of people do that. And then we don't ask for tips, but if you ever feel inclined, if you ever want to throw a couple dollars our way, the tips are just split amongst the four of us that do this. So let's look at the race preview and initial thoughts. So it is the last race of the regular season. This is it. After the checkered flag on Saturday night, the playoff grid is going to be set. So we're going back to Daytona. If you don't know, Daytona is a super speedway. So we're going to have pack racing. Because of that, when you look at points as far as dominator points, who's going to be the lap leader, who is picking up fast laps. Do we want to focus on place differential? Do we want to focus on, lap leaders? Well, since they're in a pack, these fast laps are really going to be distributed throughout the field. That one's going to be pretty much near impossible to predict what drivers are getting fast laps versus what drivers are not getting fast laps. Sometimes we will see the Cup drivers and the Xfinity drivers get into kind of the train mode where everyone just runs single file at the top. And if you are that car who's leading that front of the train, usually that's a good way to pick up a handful of laps led. But, the big one, which I have as a bullet point there, it could come at any time. It's usually when you have these pack racing, especially with stage racing and everyone being only inches away from each other, sometimes it only takes one driver to get loose or make a mistake or have a tire blown. And then before you know it, you have multiple cars wrecking out of this race. So place differential is really going to be the focus this weekend when you're looking at your lineup. Instead of trying to figure out who the lap leader is going to be, what drivers are picking up fast laps, it's just what drivers do you feel confident in can score and earn you positive place differential points, and trying to jam as many of those plays into your line. We know the super speedway racing is historically, chaotic, but if you look at this race specifically, the Daytona night race, it usually has the most amount of chaos in it. So just keep that in mind when you're building lineups. When you get to these race weekends, there's definitely an aspect of randomness and luck that goes into it too. We can sit here and talk strategy all day long. We can sit here and look at previous optimal lineups and look at how drivers have performed at previous super speedway races. But at the end of the day, it's can your driver survive? Can they get through the wrecks? Not luck isn't everything, but it's definitely a big part in those weekend. The other thing you have to kind of keep in mind is, are you going for the optimal lineup or are you just trying to cash in tournaments? So usually what we see with the optimal lineup, there is more aggressive plays, I would say, in your line. So drivers who are starting further towards the front of the field, maybe getting more aggressive, maybe picking some drivers that start inside the top 15, inside the top 20, or you can go the safer route and just, hey, I'm going to take all 5, 6 of my drivers starting 25th or worse, and know that I'm probably not going to hit the optimal lineup, but I probably have a much greater chance of cashing instead of trying to get lucky and hit that optimal lineup. So kind of comes down to you which one you want to do. One thing to keep in mind, it is a Saturday night race, and we're always used to having the Cup Series races on Sunday, but you keep in mind it is Saturday nights. Make sure you get those lineups in. Really, once qualifying is set, you really don't even need qualifying. I mean, well, I guess technically you do really need qualifying, but qualifying is really the only thing that matters. There's not even any practice this weekend. Salary does not matter. I'm not looking at salary at all. Um, it's more or less just kind of playing the ownership game. So once the qualifying grid is set, there's going to be some plays in the back where you're like, wow, this driver, he's in top tier equipment and he's starting 29th. Like, he's going to be really high owned. Well, let's potentially figure out if that's a play that we want to ride with the field on, if we want to eat that chalk, or is that a chalk play we maybe want to pivot off of and hope that he wrecks and we don't have that driver, and maybe we have the driver who starts 28th, right next to him on the starting grid, that maybe isn't in the best equipment or maybe isn't a top tier driver from a name recognition standpoint. And maybe we're going to pivot off the chalk play and go to that play. So you kind of have to play that ownership game. It's usually a mix of what chalky drivers do you want in your line and what drivers are you trying to pivot off of. When it comes time to actually building lineups, the way that I do it is once the qualifying grid is set, I just basically filter the qualifying grid by starting position. So first all the way down to 40th. And then I just find my cutoff ranges. So maybe drivers starting 1st through 12th, 13th through 25th, and 25th on through, the rest of the field. Maybe it's 0 through 10, 10 through 20, 30, so on and so forth. So figure out your cutoff points and then just select X amount of drivers in each range. What type of lineup construction do you want? Do you want more of a balanced 2-2-2 with kind of 2 drivers up front, 2 in the middle, 2 in the back? Do you want a 2-4, 2 drivers starting inside the top 20, 4 drivers starting outside the top 20? Kind of figure it out a little bit. And then after that, really just cross your fingers, cross your toes, cross anything you can, and just hope for the best. If you look at DraftKings throughout the slate, it's going to vary a lot, especially if you're doing the stack the back strategy. Your lineups are going to look completely awful. It only takes one wreck, only one big one to completely flip the slate. So that's kind of it from a race preview initial thoughts. And here's just some other stuff I wanted to point out. So as far as like interest levels go, the driver really doesn't matter. The equipment really doesn't matter. Salary really doesn't matter. All I'm really going to do is once that grid comes out, as you can see here on the left, I'm just going to filter it. And as you can see, as you get further down on the grid, our interest levels are going to increase. So anyone starting inside really the top 5 is going to be pretty much no interest for me. Not that they can't hit the optimal lineup, but they really just have no upside. And if that driver wrecks out and all your other drivers don't wreck out, well, a driver that's scoring you negative, 38 place differential points or whatever it potentially might be, it's going to be a lot worse than maybe rostering a driver that starts 33rd, wrecks out, and finishes 34th. You got to try to keep that in mind. It's going to be very rare to have a lineup with all 6 of your drivers not getting, or at least one of the 6 drivers not getting wrecked out. It's pretty rare to have all 6 of them make it through. And if you do, you have a really great chance of hitting that optimal lineup. So with that being said, again, you want to really focus on more of your drivers from the back of the field, but don't be afraid to sprinkle in a couple of drivers starting up front. Really doesn't matter who the driver is. It doesn't matter about the equipment. Every single driver is in play this weekend. I know you're like, wow, Andrew, like that's super helpful. But I mean, that's the name of the game when you get to these super speedways. So yeah, so find your pivot plays, everyone's in play. And one thing to keep in mind, it's kind of from a DFS standpoint, and just kind of from a general standpoint too, is so if you look at the points grid, we currently have 15 winners in the Cup Series. So that means there's only one spot available to lock yourself in on points, unless we get a new winner who is inside the top 30 in points. So who are those drivers? Who are some people that could point their way in, and who are some drivers that need to win to get in, and who are that if a driver isn't listed there, they're either A, locked into the playoffs, or B, they are outside of the top 30 in points and don't have a chance of making it into the playoffs. So for example, I think Corey LaJoie right now is in 31st from a points standings perspective, but he's too far behind Todd Gilliland, even if he won the race, to lock himself in. So let's look here. You got Blaney is currently in 3rd overall in the point standings. He is above Martin Truex Jr. there. So theoretically, only Blaney or Truex can point race their way in. Once you get past Truex, there's a huge drop off in points all the way down to Eric Jones. So Blaney and Truex, yeah, they're going to be going for the win, but they're basically racing each other, and they're basically points racing the differential that they have. So Truex is really hoping that Blaney wrecks early on in this race, and Blaney is also hoping that Truex either wrecks early on in this race or is able to match him point for point or have a better points day to lock himself in. Their worst case scenario is a Jones, Almirola, Dillon, Wallace, Busher, Haley, McDowell, Stenhouse, Custer, Keselowski, Burton, Dillon, and or Gilliland getting a win, because it's a win and you're in as long as you're inside the top 30 in points. So this is it for these drivers right here that I just highlighted. I mean, it's game time. I mean, it's if you don't win the race on Saturday night, you are not making the playoffs. Now, none of these drivers that I highlighted probably are going to go deep in the playoffs if they do end up making the playoffs, but that doesn't mean that they aren't trying to accomplish that. There's a lot of incentives with you and your race team with comes up making the playoffs. So keep that in mind. But yeah, I mean, that's really it. It's a lot of the stuff you've probably heard of before, stack the back. But with that too, you just be mindful of what drivers you're grabbing. It's a weekend to have fun, kind of sit back and relax, kind of root for X and root for your drivers to get through it. It's usually a weekend I play multiple lineups. It's usually a weekend I like to do a lot of crown entries and just kind of have fun with it and kind of see what happens. A lot of randomizers of just, hey, give me 6 random drivers, or randomizer on Google 1 through 38, however many drivers are in the field, and just keep hitting. And, enter, and whatever 6 numbers it gives me, those are the starting positions I'm plugging in. Don't be afraid to have some super ugly lineups. Don't be afraid to leave thousands and thousands of dollars on the table. Don't be afraid to plug in those ugly, punt plays that have terrible equipment. Yeah, so that'll hit. Hopefully that's helpful. If it is, leave a like on the video, comment any questions you have. We'll see if we do a final picks spreadsheet video and or spreadsheet, or video, I should say, video and or spreadsheet. If we do, it'll be up on Twitter. We'll post them on YouTube. But really, this is it. I mean, this is the strategy. Once the starting grid comes out, figure out what drivers you want, and good luck. All right, so that'll do it, and we will catch you next weekend.